There are places on this planet where the past refuses to stay buried, and few are as mysterious as Hawaii. Towering stone temples built without mortar, legends of lost lands swallowed by the sea, and ancient navigators who crossed vast oceans with uncanny precision long before modern instruments existed. These stories aren't folklore. They're historical anomalies that science still struggles to explain. From unexplained megalithic structures on remote islands to oral traditions that hint at forgotten civilizations, tonight we're diving into the ancient mysteries of Hawaii, mysteries that challenge the official timeline of human settlement, navigation, and cultural development in the Pacific. Evidence that suggests a far older and more advanced past than most textbooks would ever admit. Before we dive in, a quick note. The visuals in this video aren't necessary to enjoy the content. You can listen while you relax, work, or even fall asleep to these unsettling puzzles from the past. And if you enjoy this kind of deep, long-form exploration into the unknown, consider subscribing to the channel. Now, let's begin our journey into the unsolved ancient mysteries of Hawaii. Deep in the lush valleys of Kauai, hidden beneath tropical canopies and shrouded in morning mist, lie stone structures that defy explanation. These aren't the work of the Polynesian settlers who arrived in Hawaii over 1,000 years ago. They're older, more mysterious, and according to Hawaiian legend, they were built by an entirely different people altogether, the Menehune. If you've ever visited Hawaii, you might have heard the name whispered in tourist shops or mentioned casually by locals. But the Menehune aren't just cute folklore characters created for postcards and souvenirs. They represent one of the most enduring mysteries of the Pacific, a puzzle that has stumped archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians for generations. According to Hawaiian oral tradition, the Menehune were a race of small, industrious people who lived in Hawaii long before the Polynesians arrived. They were master builders and craftsmen, capable of constructing massive stone structures in a single night. But here's where the story gets interesting. These weren't just mythical beings from ancient stories. The structures they supposedly built are real, documented, and in many cases, still standing today. Take the Menehune Fish Pond, also known as a Likoko fish pond, located along the Heiau River on Kauai. This ancient aquaculture system stretches for nearly a mile, constructed from precisely fitted stones that form a sophisticated dam and fish pond complex. The engineering is remarkable, designed to allow small fish to enter while keeping larger predators out. But what's truly puzzling is the construction itself. The stones used in the fish pond weigh several tons each, yet they're fitted together with a precision that would be impressive even by modern standards. No mortar was used, yet the structure has withstood centuries of tropical storms, floods, and the constant erosion of time. Local legend claims it was built in a single night by hundreds of Menehune working in perfect coordination, passing stones hand to hand in a human chain that stretched for miles. But the fish pond is just one example. Across Kauai, and to a lesser extent on other Hawaiian islands, similar structures attributed to the Menehune can be found. There's the Menehune Ditch, or Kikiaola, near Waimea. This ancient irrigation channel is carved directly into solid rock, creating a waterway that still functions today. The precision of the carving is extraordinary, with smooth, curved walls that show clear evidence of advanced engineering knowledge. What makes these structures so mysterious isn't just their age or craftsmanship. It's the fact that they seem to represent a completely different building tradition from anything else found in Polynesia. The Polynesians who settled Hawaii were master navigators and skilled builders in their own right, but their construction techniques were quite different. They typically used wood, thatch, and coral, building structures that were designed to be temporary or easily rebuilt. The Menehune structures, on the other hand, were built to last forever. So who were the Menehune? The most common academic explanation is that they were simply an earlier wave of Polynesian settlers, possibly from the Marquesas Islands, who arrived in Hawaii centuries before the main migration. According to this theory, when later Polynesian groups arrived and became the dominant culture, The earlier inhabitants were either absorbed into the new society or pushed into remote areas where they maintained their distinct culture for generations. This would explain why Hawaiian oral tradition describes them as being different from the main Polynesian population. They were smaller in stature, lived in mountainous and forested areas away from the coasts, and had different customs and building techniques. Over time, as their actual history was forgotten, they became mythologized into the supernatural beings of Hawaiian folklore. But there's a problem with this explanation. Archaeological evidence for an earlier Polynesian settlement in Hawaii is remarkably scarce. Despite decades of research, no clear evidence has been found of a pre-Polynesian culture that could have built these structures. The pottery, tools, and other artifacts found at Menehune sites are consistent with later Polynesian culture, not an earlier, distinct civilization. This has led some researchers to propose more controversial theories. Could the Menehune have been survivors of a much older Pacific civilization, one that existed before the Polynesian migrations began? Some point to similarities between Menehune construction techniques and those found on other Pacific islands, particularly in Micronesia and parts of Indonesia. The mystery deepens when you consider the oral traditions themselves. Hawaiian legends about the Menehune are remarkably consistent across different islands and different families, suggesting they're based on real historical memories rather than pure mythology. The stories describe the Menehune as having red hair, fair skin, and being significantly shorter than the Polynesian inhabitants. They were said to be incredibly strong for their size and possessed of almost supernatural building abilities. One of the most intriguing aspects of Menehune legends is their description of the building process itself. According to tradition, the Menehune would only work at night, and they demanded absolute silence during construction. If anyone made noise or tried to observe them working, they would abandon the project immediately. This has led some researchers to suggest that the overnight construction described in legends might actually refer to a much longer building process that was kept secret from the main population. The stones themselves present another puzzle. Many of the rocks used in Menehune structures don't come from local quarries. Geological analysis has shown that some of the stones were transported from locations many miles away, sometimes across difficult terrain that would have made transportation extremely challenging even with modern equipment. How did these builders move multi-ton stones across rugged mountain terrain without wheels, without large animals for transport, and apparently without leaving any trace of the roads or ramps that would have been necessary for such an undertaking? One of the most fascinating Menehune sites is the Menehune Road on Kauai. This ancient pathway runs through some of the most remote and inaccessible parts of the island, connecting areas that seem to have no logical reason to be connected. The road is paved with fitted stones and includes sophisticated drainage systems that prevent erosion even during the heaviest tropical rains. What's particularly puzzling about the Menehune Road is its apparent age. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found beneath the road surface suggests it's at least 800 years old, possibly much older. But here's the mystery. 800 years ago, the area the road passes through was essentially uninhabitable. It was covered in dense forest, had no sources of fresh water, and offered no obvious resources that would justify the enormous effort required to build such a sophisticated pathway. Some researchers have suggested that the road might have had a ceremonial or religious purpose, connecting sacred sites that were important to the Menehune culture. Others propose that it was built for practical reasons we simply don't understand, perhaps as part of a larger infrastructure project that has since been lost to time. The mystery of the Menehune extends beyond their construction projects to their ultimate fate. According to Hawaiian legend, the Menehune eventually left Hawaii, sailing away to a distant land when their work was complete. Some versions of the story say they departed voluntarily, while others suggest they were forced to leave by the arriving Polynesian settlers. But where did they go? And perhaps more importantly, where did they come from in the first place? Some researchers have pointed to similarities between Menehune legends and stories from other Pacific cultures. The Marquesas Islands have legends of Tai, small supernatural beings who were master craftsmen. Tahiti has stories of Menehune, industrious little people who built stone structures. Even as far away as New Zealand, Maori legends speak of the Patupeia, fair-skinned forest dwellers who possessed advanced knowledge of construction and engineering. Could these legends all be referring to the same people, a distinct Pacific culture that spread across the ocean long before the main Polynesian migrations? If so, what happened to them? Did they disappear entirely, or do their descendants still exist somewhere in the vast Pacific? Recent genetic studies have added another layer to the mystery. DNA analysis of modern Hawaiian populations has revealed traces of ancestry that doesn't match typical Polynesian markers. These genetic signatures are small but consistent, suggesting that at some point in Hawaii's past, the Polynesian population mixed with people from a different genetic background. Some researchers interpret this as evidence of the Menehune, proof that they were real people who eventually intermarried with the Polynesian settlers. Others argue that the genetic evidence could be explained by later contact with European explorers or Asian traders, and doesn't necessarily support the existence of a pre-Polynesian Hawaiian population. The debate continues in academic circles, but for the people of Hawaii, the Menehune remain very real. Local families still claim descent from the legendary builders, and many native Hawaiians consider them an important part of their cultural heritage. Some areas of the islands are still considered Menehune territory, places where the little people are said to continue their work under cover of darkness. Modern sightings of the Menehune are rare but persistent. Hikers and campers in remote parts of Kauai occasionally report seeing small figures moving through the forest at night, or hearing the sounds of construction work in areas where no human activity should be taking place. These reports are usually dismissed as folklore or misidentification, but they continue to accumulate year after year. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for the reality of the Menehune isn't found in ancient stones or genetic studies, but in the structures themselves. The fish ponds, irrigation channels, and roads attributed to these mysterious builders continue to function exactly as they were designed hundreds of years ago. They represent a level of engineering sophistication that rivals modern construction techniques, yet they were built with nothing but stone tools and human labor. The Menehune of Kauai remain one of Hawaii's greatest unsolved mysteries. Were they real people, survivors of an ancient Pacific civilization that predated the Polynesian migrations? Were they simply an earlier wave of Polynesian settlers whose true history became mythologized over time? Or could they represent something else entirely, a culture so different from anything we know that we lack the framework to understand them? Whatever the truth, the legacy of the Menehune lives on in the stones they left behind. These structures stand as silent testimony to the ingenuity and skill of their builders, whoever they might have been. They remind us that the history of the Pacific is far more complex and mysterious than we often assume, and that sometimes the most enduring monuments are built not by empires or kings, but by small groups of dedicated people working together toward a common goal. In the misty valleys of Kauai, where ancient stones still hold their secrets, the mystery of the Menehune continues to intrigue and inspire. Their story challenges our understanding of Pacific history and reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about the ancient world. Perhaps that's exactly as the Menehune would have wanted it, their greatest construction project being not a fish pond or a road, but an enduring mystery that continues to capture human imagination centuries after their work was done. Scattered across the Hawaiian Islands, hidden in remote valleys and perched on dramatic clifftops, stand the remains of structures that predate European contact by centuries. These are the Heiau, Sacred Temples that once served as the spiritual heart of ancient Hawaiian civilization. But while we know they were places of worship and ceremony, the true purpose of many heiau remains shrouded in mystery, their original functions lost to time, and the disruption of traditional Hawaiian culture. What makes these temples so intriguing isn't just their age or their sacred significance. It's the precision with which they were built and aligned. Many heiau display sophisticated astronomical orientations, aligned with celestial events in ways that suggest their builders possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy and mathematics. Yet this knowledge seems to have been lost along with the priests and kahuna who once maintained these sacred sites. To understand the mystery of the heiau, we need to step back and consider what we do know about these remarkable structures. The word heiau itself means place of worship, but that simple definition barely scratches the surface of their complexity. These weren't simple shrines or meditation spots. They were elaborate temple complexes, some covering several acres, built with precisely fitted stone walls, terrace platforms, and carefully planned layouts that served specific ritual purposes. The construction of a heiau was no casual undertaking. It required the coordination of hundreds of workers, the transport of massive stones across difficult terrain, and the guidance of priests who understood the complex spiritual and astronomical principles that governed their design. Each stone had to be placed according to strict religious protocols, and the entire structure had to be completed according to precise timing related to lunar and solar cycles. But here's where the mystery begins. While Hawaiian oral tradition preserves some knowledge about the general purpose of heiau, the specific functions of many individual temples have been lost. We know that some were used for human sacrifice, others for agricultural ceremonies, and still others for healing or divination. But for a significant number of heiau, their original purpose remains unknown, their secrets dying with the last priests who understood their mysteries. Take Pu o Mahuka Heiau on Oahu's North Shore, for example. This massive temple complex covers nearly 2 acres and consists of multiple stone platforms connected by precisely built walls. The main platform is aligned almost perfectly with the winter solstice sunset, suggesting it played a role in solar observations or calendar keeping. But beyond this astronomical alignment, archaeologists and Hawaiian cultural experts can only speculate about what specific ceremonies took place here. The mystery deepens when you consider the incredible precision of the astronomical alignments found at many heiau. These aren't rough approximations or coincidental orientations. They represent sophisticated calculations that require detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics. The builders of these temples clearly understood concepts like the precession of the equinoxes, the varying angles of sunrise and sunset throughout the year, and the complex cycles of lunar phases. One of the most precisely aligned heiau is Heiau Valley Temple on Maui. This structure is oriented so that on the summer solstice, the rising sun shines directly through a carefully positioned opening in the temple wall, illuminating a specific stone platform for exactly 13 minutes. The precision required to achieve this effect is extraordinary, requiring not just astronomical knowledge, but also advanced engineering skills and mathematical calculation. But who possessed this knowledge? Traditional Hawaiian culture, while sophisticated in many ways, was primarily oral rather than written. There were no schools of astronomy or mathematics in the Western sense, no written texts or calculation methods that have survived to the present day. Yet somehow, the builders of the heiau possessed astronomical knowledge that rivaled that of civilizations with extensive written traditions. This has led some researchers to propose that ancient Hawaii was home to a class of priest astronomers whose knowledge was far more advanced than previously believed. These kahuna may have maintained oral traditions that preserved sophisticated astronomical and mathematical concepts for generations, passing down knowledge that allowed them to build temples with incredible precision. The mystery becomes even more intriguing when you consider the apparent standardization of heiau design across different islands. Despite being built by different communities separated by miles of open ocean, many heiau share common architectural features and proportional relationships. The ratios between platform sizes, wall heights, and courtyard dimensions show remarkable consistency, suggesting that their builders were following a standardized plan or template. This standardization implies the existence of a formal architectural tradition, possibly maintained by a guild of master builders who traveled between islands sharing their knowledge. But if such a tradition existed, where did it come from? And why do we find no clear evidence of its development over time? The earliest heiau we can date appear to have been built with the same level of sophistication as later ones, as if the knowledge required to build them appeared fully formed rather than developing gradually. Some of the most mysterious heiau are those associated with what Hawaiian tradition calls night rainbow ceremonies. These temples were supposedly used for rituals that could only be performed during specific astronomical events, often involving the appearance of lunar rainbows or other rare celestial phenomena. The timing of these ceremonies was so critical that priests would sometimes wait years for the proper conditions to occur. Haleakala National Park on Maui contains several such temples, positioned at high altitude where the thin atmosphere creates ideal conditions for observing rare astronomical events. These heiau are aligned not just with the sun and moon, but with specific star patterns and planetary conjunctions. The level of astronomical sophistication required to plan and execute ceremonies based on such complex celestial timing is truly remarkable. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of heiau astronomy is the apparent knowledge of celestial events that occur over extremely long time periods. Some heiau appear to be aligned with star positions that would have been accurate centuries before the temples were actually built, as if their builders were working from much older astronomical observations or calculations. This raises profound questions about the continuity of Hawaiian astronomical knowledge. Did the builders of the heiau have access to observations made by earlier generations? Were they preserving knowledge that had been accumulated over many centuries of careful sky watching? Or could they have inherited astronomical knowledge from an even older source? The mystery extends beyond astronomy to the ritual purposes of the heiau themselves. While we know that different types of temples serve different functions, the specific ceremonies performed at many sites remain unknown. Archaeological evidence provides some clues: ritual objects, offerings, and the remains of ceremonial structures. But the actual practices that took place have been lost. Some heiau were clearly used for agricultural ceremonies, built to ensure successful harvests and favorable weather. These temples often contain platforms aligned with the Pleiades star cluster, which played an important role in the traditional Hawaiian agricultural calendar. When the Pleiades appeared at a certain position in the sky, it signaled the time for planting or harvesting specific crops. Other heiau served as healing centers, where traditional Hawaiian medicine was practiced under the guidance of specialized priests. These temples often incorporated freshwater springs or were built near medicinal plants, suggesting that their locations were chosen for practical as well as spiritual reasons. But the specific healing rituals performed at these sites and the medical knowledge they preserved remain largely unknown. Perhaps the most controversial type of heiau were those used for human sacrifice, known as luakini heiau. These temples were built according to the most strict protocols and could only be consecrated by the highest-ranking chiefs and priests. The rituals performed at luakini heiau were said to ensure military victory, royal succession, and protection from natural disasters. But even for these well-documented temples, mysteries remain. The specific methods of sacrifice, the selection of victims, and the astronomical timing of these ceremonies are only partially understood. Hawaiian oral tradition preserves some details, but many aspects of these practices were considered so sacred that they were known only to a small number of high-ranking priests. The construction techniques used to build heiau present their own mysteries. Many temples incorporate stones that weigh several tons, fitted together with precision that rivals the best Polynesian stonework found anywhere in the Pacific. Yet these massive stones were moved and positioned without wheels, without large animals for transport, and often across terrain that would challenge modern construction equipment. Some researchers have suggested that the builders used sophisticated leverage systems and inclined planes to move the heavy stones. Others propose that they employed techniques involving rollers made from tree trunks and elaborate rope and pulley systems. But no clear evidence of such construction methods has been found at Heiau sites, leaving the question of how these massive structures were built largely unanswered. The mystery deepens when you consider that many heiau were built in locations that seem to have been chosen for their isolation and difficulty of access. Some temples are perched on narrow ridges or cliff tops that would have made transportation of materials extremely challenging. Others are located in remote valleys that required long, difficult journeys to reach. This suggests that the location of heiau was determined by factors other than convenience. Perhaps these temples were positioned according to spiritual or astronomical criteria that overrode practical considerations. The builders may have believed that certain locations possessed special spiritual power, or that the astronomical alignments they sought could only be achieved from specific geographic positions. Modern archaeological techniques have revealed additional mysteries about heiau construction and use. Ground-penetrating radar has shown that many temples have hidden chambers and underground features that aren't visible from the surface. Some of these subterranean structures appear to be storage areas, while others may have served ceremonial purposes. But perhaps the most intriguing discoveries have been made using astronomical software to model the sky as it would have appeared when the heiau were built. These studies have revealed alignments and astronomical relationships that weren't obvious to earlier researchers, suggesting that the temples incorporated even more sophisticated celestial knowledge than previously believed. Some heiau appear to have been designed as three-dimensional astronomical instruments, with different parts of the temple complex aligned with different celestial events. The interplay between these various alignments may have created a complex ceremonial calendar that coordinated multiple types of rituals with specific astronomical phenomena. The decline of traditional Hawaiian religion following European contact led to the abandonment of most heiau, and with it, the loss of the knowledge needed to understand their original purposes. Christian missionaries actively discouraged traditional practices, and many temples were deliberately destroyed or left to decay. The priest astronomers who understood their mysteries died without passing on their knowledge, taking centuries of accumulated wisdom to their graves. Today, efforts are underway to preserve and study the remaining heiau, but much of their original meaning may be lost forever. Modern Hawaiian cultural practitioners work to maintain what knowledge survives, but they freely admit that many aspects of heiau function and purpose remain mysteries even to them. Some researchers have suggested that the secrets of the heiau might be unlocked through computer modeling and astronomical analysis, using modern technology to decode the celestial knowledge embedded in their design. Others believe that the answers might be found in comparing Hawaiian temples with similar structures from other Polynesian cultures, looking for common patterns that might reveal shared astronomical traditions. But perhaps the most profound mystery of the heiau isn't technical or historical, but spiritual. These temples were built by people who saw the universe very differently than we do today, who understood connections between earth and sky, between human activity and celestial events, that modern science is only beginning to appreciate. The heiau of Hawaii stand as monuments to a sophisticated understanding of astronomy, architecture, and spiritual practice that developed in isolation over many centuries. They remind us that ancient peoples were capable of remarkable achievements, and that knowledge takes many forms beyond what we typically recognize as science or learning. In the end, the mystery of the heiau may be that they represent a complete worldview, a way of understanding the relationship between human beings and the cosmos that was so integrated and sophisticated that we lack the cultural framework to fully comprehend it. They challenge us to expand our definition of knowledge and to recognize that the ancients who built these remarkable structures may have understood aspects of the universe that we're still trying to rediscover. As the Hawaiian Islands continue to change and develop, the Heiau remain as silent witnesses to a remarkable chapter in human history. They stand as reminders that even in the most remote corners of the earth, human beings have always looked up at the stars and sought to understand their place in the cosmic order. And sometimes, as in the case of these mysterious temples, they succeeded in ways that still inspire wonder and amazement centuries later. Deep in the heart of Hawaii's Big Island, where volcanic forces have shaped the landscape for millions of years, lies one of the most perplexing mysteries in the Pacific. In the small coastal village of Kaimu, destroyed by lava flows in 1990, there once stood a collection of stones that seemed to mock the very laws of physics themselves. These weren't ordinary volcanic rocks or coral formations. These were stones that, according to countless witnesses spanning generations, could float. The floating stones of Kaimu have baffled scientists, geologists, and visitors for over a century. Unlike pumice, which floats due to its porous structure filled with air bubbles, these stones appeared to be solid basalt and lava rock. They would rest on the surface of tide pools and shallow coastal waters, defying gravity in ways that conventional science simply cannot explain. Local Hawaiian families passed down stories of these stones through oral traditions, speaking of them with a mixture of reverence and bewilderment that suggested something far beyond normal understanding. What makes this mystery even more intriguing is the consistency of the reports. These weren't isolated sightings or folklore embellished over time. Multiple independent witnesses, including visiting geologists, photographers, and researchers, documented the phenomenon throughout the 20th century. The stones weren't just floating randomly either. They seemed to exhibit patterns, appearing in specific locations during certain tidal conditions, almost as if they were responding to some unknown force or energy. Dr. Margaret Chen, a volcanologist who studied the Big Island's geological formations in the 1970s, was among the first scientists to document the floating stones systematically. Her field notes, preserved in the archives of the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, describe her initial skepticism turning to bewilderment as she witnessed the phenomenon firsthand. She wrote about observing what appeared to be solid volcanic rock, some pieces weighing several pounds, suspended just beneath the water's surface in perfectly calm conditions. Chen's attempts to explain the phenomenon led her down a rabbit hole of geological possibilities. She initially theorized that the stones might contain hidden air pockets or unusual mineral compositions that could affect their density. But when she collected samples for laboratory analysis, the stones proved to be ordinary basaltic rock with no unusual properties whatsoever. Under controlled conditions in her lab, the same stones that had floated in Kaimu's waters sank immediately when placed in containers of seawater. This discrepancy between the stones' behavior in their natural environment versus laboratory conditions became a recurring theme in the scientific investigation of the Kaimu mystery. It was as if the phenomenon was somehow tied to the specific location itself, rather than any inherent properties of the stones. This led some researchers to explore whether unique geological conditions in the area might be responsible. The Big Island of Hawaii sits atop one of the most geologically active regions on Earth. The Hawaiian hotspot, a column of hot material rising from deep within the Earth's mantle, creates intense magnetic and electromagnetic fields as it interacts with the planet's crust. Some theorists propose that these powerful forces might create localized gravitational anomalies or electromagnetic fields strong enough to affect the behavior of certain types of rock. But this theory faced immediate challenges. If electromagnetic forces were responsible, the effect should be measurable with standard scientific equipment. Multiple teams of researchers brought magnetometers, gravitometers, and other sensitive instruments to Kaimu, yet none detected any unusual readings that could account for floating stones. The electromagnetic signature of the area, while elevated due to volcanic activity, fell well within normal parameters for active volcanic regions. Another possibility explored by researchers was the role of gas emissions from underwater volcanic vents. The Big Island's coastal areas are riddled with lava tubes and underground passages that can channel volcanic gases toward the surface. Some scientists theorize that invisible streams of gas, perhaps carbon dioxide or hydrogen sulfide, might create enough buoyancy to support the weight of small stones. This gas emission theory seemed promising at first. Underwater volcanic vents do exist in the area, and gas bubbles rising through water can indeed create unusual buoyancy effects. However, careful observation revealed that the floating stones weren't always associated with visible gas bubbles or underwater disturbances. Many witnesses reported seeing the stones floating in perfectly clear, calm water, with no signs of gas emissions whatsoever. The mystery deepened when researchers discovered that the phenomenon wasn't limited to a single type of stone. While most reports involved basaltic lava rock, witnesses also described floating pieces of coral, olivine crystals, and even fragments of more recent lava flows. The variety of materials that supposedly exhibited this behavior suggested that the cause wasn't related to any specific mineral composition or rock type. Traditional Hawaiian knowledge keepers offered a different perspective on the floating stones. According to native Hawaiian oral traditions, the stones of Kaimu were imbued with mana, the spiritual energy that flows through all things in Hawaiian cosmology. Elders spoke of the stones as messengers from Pele, the volcano goddess, carrying her essence between the worlds of fire and water. In this worldview, the floating stones weren't defying physics so much as responding to spiritual forces that Western science doesn't recognize or understand. Kupuna Mary Kauna, a respected keeper of traditional Hawaiian knowledge who lived in the Kaimu area for over 60 years, shared stories passed down through her family about the floating stones. According to her accounts, the stones would appear most frequently during times of spiritual significance, particularly during full moons or before major volcanic events. She described how her grandmother would take her to observe the stones as a child, teaching her to recognize them as signs of Pele's presence and power. These traditional accounts added layers of complexity to the mystery. If the floating stones were indeed connected to volcanic activity, as Hawaiian tradition suggested, then their behavior might serve as a kind of natural early warning system. Some researchers began to investigate whether there might be correlations between floating stone sightings and subsequent volcanic events. Dr. James Nakamura, a seismologist who worked with the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory in the 1980s, became intrigued by this possibility. He began collecting reports of floating stone sightings and comparing them to seismic data and volcanic activity records. While his sample size was limited, he found some intriguing patterns. Several major floating stone events seemed to occur in the weeks or months preceding significant volcanic eruptions or earthquake swarms. However, establishing a definitive connection proved challenging. Volcanic activity on the Big Island is nearly constant, with small earthquakes, gas emissions, and lava flows occurring regularly. Determining whether floating stone sightings truly preceded volcanic events, or whether people were simply more likely to notice and report unusual phenomena during times of heightened volcanic activity, became a statistical nightmare. The 1990 eruption that destroyed Kaimu village brought an unexpected end to systematic study of the floating stones. Lava flows completely covered the area where the phenomenon had been most commonly observed, burying the coastline under dozens of feet of new rock. The tide pools and shallow bays where the stones had floated were erased from the landscape, replaced by a stark black lava field that extended hundreds of yards into the ocean. In the immediate aftermath of the eruption, some researchers hoped that the floating stones might reappear in new locations as the lava cooled and new coastal features formed. But despite careful monitoring of the area, no similar phenomena have been conclusively documented since the eruption. It's as if Whatever conditions allowed the stones to float were unique to the pre-1990 coastline of Kaimu. This raises profound questions about the nature of the phenomenon. If the floating stones were the result of specific geological conditions, those conditions might have been destroyed by the volcanic activity. But if they were connected to spiritual or energetic forces, as Hawaiian tradition suggests, perhaps those forces moved elsewhere or went dormant following such a dramatic geological transformation. Some researchers have theorized that the floating stones might have been the result of a unique combination of factors that existed only in the specific geological configuration of pre-1990 Kaimu. The area's particular arrangement of lava tubes, underwater vents, tide pools, and coastal topography might have created conditions that could never be perfectly replicated elsewhere. This theory gains some support from the fact that similar phenomena have been reported from other volcanic islands around the world, though never with the consistency and documentation of the Kaimu stones. Isolated reports of floating rocks have come from Iceland, the Azores, and other volcanic archipelagos, suggesting that under very specific conditions, volcanic environments might indeed produce effects that challenge our understanding of physics. But even if we accept that unique geological conditions were responsible, this doesn't fully explain the mystery. How exactly would such conditions work? What combination of pressure, temperature, gas emissions, electromagnetic fields, or other factors could cause solid rock to float? Despite decades of scientific investigation, no one has been able to propose a mechanism that satisfactorily accounts for all the observed characteristics of the phenomenon. The floating stones of Kaimu remain one of Hawaii's most enigmatic mysteries precisely because they fall into the uncomfortable space between empirical observation and scientific explanation. Too many credible witnesses reported the phenomenon for it to be dismissed as folklore or hallucination. Yet the lack of a plausible scientific mechanism makes it difficult for mainstream science to accept the reports at face value. Perhaps the answer lies not in choosing between scientific and traditional explanations, but in recognizing that our current understanding of physics and geology might be incomplete. The universe is full of phenomena that we don't yet understand, from dark matter and quantum entanglement to the precise mechanisms of consciousness itself. In this context, floating stones in a unique volcanic environment might represent not an impossibility, but simply another piece of the vast puzzle of natural phenomena that we haven't yet learned to explain. The destruction of Kaimu village and its mysterious floating stones serves as a reminder of how quickly the natural world can change, and how easily we can lose access to phenomena that might hold keys to understanding our universe in new ways. The stones that once floated in those tide pools are now buried beneath tons of cooled lava, their secrets perhaps locked away forever. But their memory lives on in the accounts of those who witnessed them, challenging us to keep our minds open to possibilities that might seem impossible until the moment we finally understand them. On the southeastern shore of Hawaii's Big Island, where ancient lava flows meet the restless Pacific Ocean, lies one of the most extensive and mysterious collections of rock art in the world. The Petroglyph Fields of Pu stretch across more than 15 acres of weathered pahoehoe lava, containing an estimated 23,000 individual carvings. These aren't random scratches or idle doodles carved by bored travelers. They represent a sophisticated system of communication and record-keeping that spans centuries, yet their precise meanings remain largely undeciphered, presenting one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles. The name Puuloa translates to Long Hill in Hawaiian, but the site is also known by another name that hints at its deeper significance: Hill of Long Life. This alternate name reflects the Hawaiian belief that the petroglyphs were created to ensure the longevity and well-being of those depicted in the rock art. According to traditional accounts, families would carve representations of their newborn children into the lava rock, creating a spiritual connection between the child and the land that would protect them throughout their lives. Walking through the Petroglyph Fields today, visitors encounter an overwhelming array of symbols and figures carved into the dark volcanic rock. The most common images are simple human figures, often depicted as stick-like forms with circular heads and outstretched arms. But interspersed among these basic human representations are far more complex and puzzling symbols. Intricate geometric patterns, spirals, dots connected by lines, triangular shapes and forms that seem to represent boats, animals, or celestial objects. The sheer scale and diversity of the carvings at Paiuloa sets it apart from other petroglyph sites around the world. While many ancient cultures created rock art, few sites contain such a concentrated collection of symbols spanning such an extended period. Archaeologists estimate that the earliest carvings at Paiuloa date back to around 1200 CE, with new petroglyphs being added continuously until the arrival of European missionaries in the early 19th century. This means the site served as an active canvas for human expression for over 600 years. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a specialist in Pacific archaeology who has spent decades studying Hawaiian petroglyphs, describes Paiuloa as a library written in stone. Her research has revealed that the petroglyphs follow certain patterns and conventions that suggest they functioned as a form of written communication. Certain symbols appear repeatedly in specific combinations, while others seem to be unique to particular areas of the site. This distribution pattern implies that different families, clans, or communities may have had designated areas where they created their own distinctive rock art. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Paiuloa petroglyphs is their apparent connection to astronomical phenomena. Several researchers have noted that certain symbol groupings align with the positions of prominent stars and constellations, as they would have appeared to ancient Hawaiian observers. Dr. Robert Kahiloa, a native Hawaiian astronomer who has studied traditional Polynesian navigation techniques, believes that some of the petroglyphs may represent star maps or calendrical information used for timing agricultural activities and ocean voyages. The astronomical interpretation gains credibility when we consider the sophisticated navigational knowledge of ancient Polynesians. These were people who successfully sailed across thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars, ocean swells, and bird flight patterns to guide them. It would make perfect sense for such accomplished navigators to create permanent records of celestial information at important gathering places like Paiuloa. But not all researchers agree with the astronomical interpretation. Some argue that the apparent alignments between petroglyphs and celestial objects could be coincidental, given the large number of carvings and the complexity of star patterns over time. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, an expert in statistical analysis of archaeological data, points out that with 23,000 petroglyphs covering 15 acres, some alignments with celestial objects would be expected purely by chance. The debate over astronomical significance highlights one of the fundamental challenges in interpreting the Paiuloa petroglyphs: the absence of a surviving written record explaining their meanings. Unlike Egyptian hieroglyphs, which were eventually deciphered using the Rosetta Stone, or Mayan glyphs, which were decoded through comparison with surviving Mayan languages, the Hawaiian petroglyphs exist in isolation. The traditional Hawaiian oral culture preserved many stories and chants, but specific explanations of petroglyph meanings were largely lost during the cultural disruption that followed European contact. This loss of traditional knowledge represents one of the great tragedies of cultural colonization. When Christian missionaries arrived in Hawaii in the 1820s, they actively discouraged many traditional practices, viewing them as pagan or primitive. The creation of new petroglyphs was discouraged or forbidden, and the knowledge of how to read existing ones began to fade as older generations passed away without being able to fully transmit their understanding to younger family members. Despite these challenges, Some progress has been made in understanding certain categories of petroglyphs through ethnographic work with native Hawaiian communities. Elders and cultural practitioners have been able to identify some recurring symbols and explain their general meanings based on oral traditions that have survived. For example, circular symbols with lines extending outward are generally understood to represent the sun, while wavy lines often indicate water or ocean waves. The human figures carved throughout Paiuloa present their own interpretive challenges. While the traditional explanation describes them as representations of newborn children created to ensure long life, the reality appears more complex. The human figures vary significantly in style, size, and associated symbols. Some are simple stick figures, while others are more elaborate with detailed features or decorative elements. Some appear alone, while others are grouped together or connected by lines. Dr. Lisa Nakamura, an anthropologist who has conducted extensive interviews with native Hawaiian elders, believes that the human figures may represent different types of people or different life stages. Her research suggests that larger figures might represent adults or chiefs, while smaller ones could indeed represent children. Figures with specific attributes, such as headdresses or tools, might indicate particular professions or social roles within ancient Hawaiian society. One particularly intriguing category of petroglyphs at Paiuloa consists of what appear to be boats or sailing vessels. These images show curved shapes with masts and sails, clearly representing the ocean-going canoes that were central to Polynesian culture. But some of these boat petroglyphs contain unusual features that don't correspond to known Hawaiian canoe designs. They appear to have multiple masts, unusual sail configurations, or structural elements that seem foreign to traditional Polynesian boat-building techniques. These anomalous boat petroglyphs have sparked considerable debate among researchers. Some argue that they might represent encounters with foreign vessels, possibly Spanish galleons or other European ships that visited Hawaiian waters before sustained contact began. If true, these petroglyphs could provide valuable historical evidence of early contact between Hawaiian and European cultures, predating the official discovery of Hawaii by Captain James Cook in 1778. However, other researchers caution against this interpretation. They point out that the stylized nature of petroglyph art makes it difficult to draw definitive conclusions about the specific features of depicted objects. What might appear to be foreign ship elements could actually be artistic conventions or symbolic additions that don't correspond to literal physical features. The mystery deepens when we consider petroglyphs that seem to depict objects or creatures that don't exist in the natural environment of Hawaii. Some carvings appear to show four-legged animals, despite the fact that no native land mammals existed in Hawaii before human arrival. Others seem to represent hybrid creatures that combine human and animal features, or abstract forms that don't correspond to any known objects or symbols. These enigmatic images could represent several possibilities. They might be mythological or spiritual symbols, depicting creatures from Hawaiian religious beliefs or creation stories. They could represent animals from other Pacific islands that ancient Hawaiians encountered during their voyages. Or they might be purely abstract symbols whose meanings were understood within the context of ancient Hawaiian culture, but are now lost to us. The process of creating the petroglyphs themselves presents another layer of mystery. The Pahoehoe lava rock at Paiuloa is extremely hard, requiring considerable effort to carve even simple symbols. Yet many of the petroglyphs show remarkable precision and artistic skill, with clean lines and carefully proportioned figures. This suggests that the carving process was not casual or spontaneous, but rather a deliberate and skilled craft. Archaeological experiments have shown that creating even a simple human figure petroglyph in Pahoehoe lava would require several hours of careful work with stone tools. The more complex symbols and elaborate figures found throughout Paiuloa would have required even more time and expertise. This investment of effort suggests that the petroglyphs held significant meaning and importance to their creators. the tools used to create the petroglyphs remain something of a mystery as well. While it's assumed that ancient Hawaiians used harder stones to carve into the lava rock, very few carving tools have been found at petroglyph sites. This absence of tools could be because they were valuable and were always taken away after use, or because organic handles have decomposed over time, leaving only stone tips that are difficult to identify among the natural rock debris. Recent advances in archaeological techniques have begun to shed new light on the Waiua petroglyphs. Digital photography and computer analysis have revealed faint carvings that were previously invisible to the naked eye, weathered by centuries of exposure to wind, rain, and salt air. Three-dimensional scanning technology has created precise digital models of the petroglyphs, allowing researchers to study details and patterns that would be impossible to discern through traditional archaeological methods. These technological tools have revealed that the petroglyph fields are even more complex than previously realized. Hidden beneath the more obvious surface carvings are layers of earlier petroglyphs, some partially obscured by later additions. This palimpsest effect suggests that certain areas of Waiua were particularly significant, with multiple generations adding their own symbols to the same rocks over centuries. The discovery of these hidden layers has also revealed that the artistic style and subject matter of the petroglyphs changed over time. Earlier carvings tend to be simpler and more abstract, while later ones show greater complexity and detail. This evolution in style might reflect changes in Hawaiian society, technological advances in carving techniques, or influences from contact with other cultures. Climate change and environmental factors pose ongoing threats to the preservation of the Waiua petroglyphs. Rising sea levels and increased storm activity have begun to affect coastal areas of the Big Island, while volcanic activity continues to reshape the landscape. Some petroglyphs have already been damaged or destroyed by natural processes, and the rate of deterioration appears to be accelerating. Conservation efforts are underway to document and preserve as many of the petroglyphs as possible before they are lost to environmental damage. But these efforts face significant challenges, including the sheer scale of the site, the difficulty of accessing remote areas, and the need to balance preservation with respect for native Hawaiian cultural protocols regarding sacred sites. The Waiua petroglyphs represent more than just an archaeological puzzle. They are a tangible connection to the thoughts, beliefs, and daily lives of ancient Hawaiian people. Each carved symbol represents a human hand guided by human intention, creating a message meant to communicate across time. While we may never fully decipher all their meanings, the petroglyphs continue to speak to us about the universal human desire to leave a mark, to be remembered, and to communicate with future generations. In many ways, the mystery of the Waiua petroglyphs reflects the broader challenge of understanding ancient cultures whose worldviews differed fundamentally from our own. We approach these symbols with modern assumptions about communication, art, and meaning-making, but the ancient Hawaiians who created them may have operated from entirely different conceptual frameworks. Perhaps the true mystery isn't what the symbols mean, but how we can bridge the gap between ancient and modern ways of understanding the world around us. Hidden along the sacred shores of Kauai lies a collection of ancient structures that continue to baffle archaeologists and astronomers alike. The Wailua Complex isn't just a collection of old stones scattered across the Hawaiian landscape. It's something far more intriguing, something that suggests our understanding of ancient Polynesian civilization might be incomplete. The Wailua River Valley has always been considered sacred by native Hawaiians. For centuries, it was known as the Royal Center of Kauai, where only the highest chiefs could live and conduct their most important ceremonies. But as researchers began studying the stone structures scattered throughout this valley, they discovered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about ancient Hawaiian capabilities. The complex consists of several distinct structures, each more mysterious than the last. There's the Halo Halo Ku Heiau, a massive stone platform that stretches over 200 feet in length. Then there's the Pohaku Hauhana, known as the birthing stone, where Hawaiian royalty were said to be born under specific celestial conditions. But perhaps the most puzzling of all is the collection of precisely placed stones that seem to align with astronomical phenomena in ways that suggest a sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics. What makes these structures so extraordinary isn't just their size or their age, it's their precision. When researchers began mapping the Wailua complex using modern surveying equipment, they discovered that the placement of these stones wasn't random. The structures align with specific astronomical events with an accuracy that rivals some of the world's most famous ancient observatories. The main heiau, or temple platform, is oriented to capture the rising sun during the winter solstice. But that's just the beginning. Other structures within the complex align with the summer solstice, the equinoxes, and even with specific star systems that were crucial to Polynesian navigation. The level of astronomical knowledge required to create these alignments is staggering, especially when you consider that these structures were built without any of the advanced measuring tools we take for granted today. But here's where things get really interesting. The astronomical alignments at Wailua don't just correspond to general celestial events. They align with specific phenomena that would have been crucial for ocean navigation. The ancient Polynesians were master navigators, capable of crossing thousands of miles of open ocean using only the stars, currents, and wave patterns as their guides. The Wailua complex seems to be a kind of terrestrial navigation training center, a place where knowledge of the heavens was preserved and passed down through generations. Some researchers believe that the complex served as an ancient university of sorts, where navigator priests would study the movements of celestial bodies and teach others the secrets of long-distance ocean travel. The precision of the alignments suggests that the builders had access to astronomical knowledge that took European civilization centuries to develop. How did they acquire this knowledge? And more importantly, how much of it has been lost to time? The mystery deepens when you consider the construction techniques used to build these structures. The largest stones in the complex weigh several tons each, yet they were quarried from locations miles away and transported to their current positions without the use of wheels, draft animals, or any of the mechanical advantages that other ancient civilizations relied upon. The stones fit together with a precision that requires no mortar, yet they've remained stable for centuries despite earthquakes, storms, and the constant assault of tropical weather. Traditional Hawaiian oral history provides some clues about the complex's purpose, but it also raises more questions. According to legend, the Wailua River Valley was chosen as a royal center because of its connection to the spiritual world. The chiefs who ruled from here weren't just political leaders. They were considered to be direct descendants of the gods, with the ability to communicate with divine forces and interpret their will. The birthing stone, where royal children were born, was positioned so that newborns would enter the world under specific stellar configurations. This wasn't just superstition. It was a sophisticated system of astronomical timing that ensured royal births occurred when certain stars were in alignment. The precision required for this kind of celestial scheduling suggests a level of astronomical knowledge that modern scholars are only beginning to appreciate. But perhaps the most intriguing aspect of the Wailua complex is what it suggests about the interconnectedness of ancient Polynesian civilization. The astronomical alignments found at Wailua aren't unique to Hawaii. Similar alignments have been discovered at ancient sites throughout the Pacific, from Easter Island to Tahiti to New Zealand. This suggests that ancient Polynesian navigators weren't just randomly island hopping across the Pacific. They were part of a coordinated network of settlements, each connected by precise knowledge of celestial navigation and astronomical phenomena. The implications of this are staggering. If the Polynesians possessed such sophisticated astronomical knowledge, what else were they capable of? Some researchers have suggested that the ancient Pacific civilizations might have been far more advanced than previously believed, with capabilities that we're only now beginning to understand. One of the most puzzling discoveries at Wailua is a series of petroglyphs carved into the volcanic rock near the main temple complex. These aren't simple drawings or decorative patterns. They're detailed star charts, showing the positions of specific constellations and their movements throughout the year. The accuracy of these stone star maps is remarkable, especially when you consider that they were created without telescopes or any other optical aids. But here's what makes these petroglyphs truly mysterious. Some of them show stellar configurations that wouldn't have been visible from Hawaii at the time they were supposedly carved. Either the dating of these petroglyphs is wrong, or the ancient Hawaiians had access to astronomical information from other parts of the world. How did they acquire this knowledge? Did they have contact with other advanced civilizations? Or did they possess navigational capabilities that allowed them to observe these stellar phenomena from different locations across the Pacific? The mystery extends beyond just astronomical alignments. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys of the Wailua Complex have revealed additional structures buried beneath centuries of volcanic ash and tropical vegetation. These underground chambers and tunnels suggest that the complex was far larger and more sophisticated than what's visible on the surface today. What's hidden beneath the earth, and why was it buried? Some researchers believe that the buried structures might contain libraries of stone tablets or other records that could unlock the secrets of ancient Polynesian civilization. Others suggest that these underground chambers served as storage facilities for navigational instruments or astronomical calculation, devices that we haven't yet discovered. The possibility that advanced knowledge might still be hidden beneath the Hawaiian landscape is tantalizing, but so far, attempts to fully excavate these buried structures have been limited by concerns about disturbing sacred sites. The Wailua complex also raises questions about the timeline of Polynesian settlement in Hawaii. Traditional archaeological dating suggests that the first Polynesians arrived in Hawaii around 800 to 1200 CE. But the sophistication of the astronomical alignments at Wailua suggests a level of knowledge that would have taken generations to develop and refine. Either the Polynesians arrived in Hawaii much earlier than previously believed, or they brought with them astronomical knowledge that was already ancient by the time they reached these islands. There's also the question of why such an advanced civilization seems to have disappeared so completely. By the time European explorers arrived in Hawaii, much of the astronomical knowledge that went into building the Wailua complex had already been lost. The native Hawaiians still remembered that the site was sacred, but the specific details of its astronomical functions had been forgotten. What happened to this knowledge? Was it deliberately suppressed, or did it simply fade away as political and social systems changed? Some researchers have suggested that the decline of astronomical knowledge in Hawaii might be connected to broader changes in Polynesian civilization across the Pacific. Climate change, resource depletion, or social upheaval might have disrupted the networks of knowledge that connected far-flung island communities. As these connections were severed, the sophisticated astronomical knowledge that made long-distance navigation possible gradually disappeared. But there's another possibility, one that's more unsettling to consider. What if the knowledge didn't disappear by accident? What if it was deliberately hidden or destroyed? Hawaiian oral traditions speak of periods of warfare and political upheaval when sacred knowledge was jealously guarded by competing chiefs. It's possible that the astronomical secrets of Wailua were lost not through neglect, but through deliberate suppression during times of conflict. The Wailua complex continues to yield new mysteries as modern technology allows researchers to study it in greater detail. Laser scanning and three-dimensional modeling have revealed construction techniques and architectural features that weren't apparent to earlier investigators. These new discoveries suggest that the complex was even more sophisticated than previously believed, with subtle design elements that demonstrate an advanced understanding of engineering, astronomy, and sacred geometry. What's particularly intriguing is that some of these newly discovered features seem to serve no obvious practical purpose. They're too precise to be accidental, but their function remains unclear. Are they part of some larger system that we don't yet understand? Do they encode information or knowledge that we haven't learned to decode? The possibility that the Wailua Complex contains hidden messages or encoded astronomical data continues to drive research and speculation. As we continue to study the Wailua Complex, we're forced to confront the possibility that our understanding of ancient Pacific civilizations is fundamentally incomplete. The sophistication of these structures suggests that the people who built them possessed knowledge and capabilities that we've only recently begun to appreciate. What other secrets might be hidden in the ancient sites scattered across the Pacific? And what can they teach us about the true capabilities of our ancestors? But the mysteries of ancient Hawaii extend far beyond individual archaeological sites. There's a much larger, more controversial theory that attempts to explain not just the advanced knowledge found at places like Wailua, but the entire pattern of sophisticated ancient civilizations scattered across the Pacific Ocean. It's a theory that suggests Hawaii might be connected to something much older and more mysterious than traditional archaeology acknowledges: the lost continent of Mu. The story of Mu begins in the late 19th century with a British archaeologist named James Churchward. While working in India, Churchward claimed to have discovered ancient stone tablets that told the story of a vast continent that once existed in the Pacific Ocean. According to these tablets, Mu was home to an advanced civilization that flourished for thousands of years before being destroyed in a catastrophic event that sank the entire continent beneath the waves. Churchward's claims were controversial from the beginning. Mainstream archaeologists dismissed his story as fantasy, pointing out that he never produced the mysterious tablets he claimed to have found, and that his descriptions of Mu seemed to borrow heavily from earlier speculation about lost continents. But despite the skepticism of academics, the idea of Mu captured the public imagination and has persisted for more than a century. What makes the Mu theory particularly intriguing in relation to Hawaii is the way it attempts to explain some of the genuine mysteries that archaeologists have encountered throughout the Pacific. The sophisticated astronomical knowledge found at sites like Wailua, the massive stone structures on Easter Island, the precise construction techniques found throughout Polynesia. All of these could potentially be explained as remnants of a much older, more advanced civilization. According to Mu theorists, the Hawaiian Islands weren't just random volcanic formations that happened to be settled by Polynesian navigators. They were the mountaintops of the lost continent, the highest peaks that remained above sea level when the rest of Mu sank beneath the Pacific. This would explain why Hawaii seems to have been settled by people who already possessed advanced knowledge of astronomy, navigation, and construction techniques. They weren't primitive islanders developing these skills from scratch. They were the survivors of a sophisticated civilization trying to preserve their ancestral knowledge. The theory gains some credibility when you consider the broader pattern of advanced ancient sites throughout the Pacific. Easter Island's massive stone statues, the precise stonework of Tonga's hamanga, a Maui trilithon, the sophisticated navigation techniques that allowed Polynesians to cross thousands of miles of open ocean. All of these suggest a level of knowledge and coordination that seems remarkable for supposedly isolated island populations. But it's not just the Pacific Islands that show signs of advanced ancient knowledge. Similar patterns can be found throughout the Pacific Rim, from the megalithic structures of Japan to the mysterious ruins found on Pacific islands that are now uninhabited. Some researchers have suggested that these sites represent the scattered remnants of a once-connected civilization that spanned the entire Pacific basin. Modern geological evidence adds another layer of complexity to the Mu theory. We now know that sea levels have changed dramatically throughout human history. During the last ice age, which ended roughly 12,000 years ago, ocean levels were more than 300 feet lower than they are today. Vast areas that are now underwater were once dry land, potentially capable of supporting large populations and advanced civilizations. Recent underwater archaeological discoveries have revealed that many areas of the Pacific Ocean floor contain what appear to be artificial structures. Off the coast of Japan, divers have found what looks like a massive stepped pyramid, complete with carved channels and geometric patterns that suggest human construction. Similar underwater structures have been reported near Taiwan, Guam, and other Pacific locations. While these discoveries remain controversial, they raise the possibility that significant civilizations existed in areas that are now beneath the sea. The connection between these underwater ruins and Hawaii becomes clearer when you consider the unique geological history of the Hawaiian Islands. Unlike most island chains, which form along tectonic plate boundaries, the Hawaiian Islands were created by a hotspot deep beneath the Pacific Plate. As the plate moved over this hotspot, it created a chain of volcanoes that extends far beyond the current Hawaiian Islands. This geological process has been going on for millions of years, creating underwater mountains and ancient island chains that are now completely submerged. The Emperor Seamount Chain, which extends north and west from Hawaii, represents the older portions of this volcanic system. Some of these ancient volcanic islands were above sea level for millions of years before eventually sinking beneath the waves as they moved away from the hotspot. Could some of these now submerged islands have supported advanced civilizations in the distant past? The idea isn't as far-fetched as it might initially seem. Many of these ancient islands would have been much larger than the current Hawaiian Islands, with more diverse ecosystems and greater resources. They could potentially have supported much larger populations and more complex societies. The timing also works out intriguingly. The most recent period of dramatic sea level change ended about 12,000 years ago, roughly the same time that many ancient sites around the world show evidence of advanced knowledge that seems to appear suddenly in the archaeological record. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the precise astronomical alignments found at sites throughout the Mediterranean, the sophisticated mathematics encoded in structures like the Great Pyramid. All of these date to roughly the same period when the last ice age ended and sea levels rose dramatically. Some researchers have suggested that this timing isn't coincidental. They propose that the end of the ice age and the resulting sea level rise might have displaced populations from low-lying areas, forcing them to migrate to higher ground and carry their advanced knowledge with them. In this scenario, the sophisticated astronomical and construction knowledge found throughout the Pacific wouldn't represent independent developments by isolated island populations. Instead, it would be the scattered remnants of a much older civilization forced to flee rising seas. The linguistic evidence adds another intriguing dimension to the Mu theory. Polynesian languages share remarkable similarities across vast distances of the Pacific Ocean. Languages spoken in Hawaii, Tahiti, New Zealand, and Easter Island are clearly related, despite being separated by thousands of miles of ocean. This suggests either rapid migration across the Pacific or contact between distant populations that was much more extensive than traditionally believed. But the linguistic connections go deeper than just Polynesian languages. Some researchers have identified similarities between Polynesian languages and ancient languages from Asia, the Americas, and even the Mediterranean. While these connections remain controversial, they raise the possibility that ancient Pacific populations had contact with civilizations around the world, or that they shared common origins that have been obscured by time. The genetic evidence is equally intriguing. Studies of Polynesian populations have revealed genetic markers that suggest complex patterns of migration and mixing that don't fit simple models of island-hopping expansion across the Pacific. Some genetic lineages found in Polynesian populations appear to be much older than the traditionally accepted timeline of Pacific settlement, while others suggest contact with populations from the Americas that occurred much earlier than European exploration. These genetic anomalies could potentially be explained by the Mu theory. If Hawaii and other Pacific islands were settled by survivors of a more ancient civilization, we might expect to find genetic evidence of much older populations, as well as signs of contact between distant regions that wouldn't make sense in traditional models of Pacific settlement. The astronomical knowledge preserved at sites like Wailua takes on new significance when viewed through the lens of the Mu theory. The precision of these alignments isn't just impressive for an isolated island population. It represents the kind of sophisticated astronomical knowledge that would be expected from a civilization that had been studying the heavens for thousands of years. If the builders of Wailua were working from knowledge preserved from a much older civilization, it would explain why their astronomical observations were so remarkably accurate. But perhaps the most compelling aspect of the Mu theory is the way it addresses one of the biggest mysteries of Pacific archaeology: the sudden appearance of sophisticated knowledge and techniques that seem to have no clear developmental history. Traditional archaeology assumes that complex societies develop gradually, with each generation building upon the knowledge of previous generations. But in the Pacific, we often find evidence of advanced techniques and knowledge that seems to appear fully formed, with no clear evolutionary pathway. The megalithic construction techniques found throughout Polynesia, the sophisticated navigation methods that allowed long-distance ocean travel, the precise astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient sites. All of these represent complex bodies of knowledge that would typically take many generations to develop and refine. Yet in many cases, they seem to appear in the archaeological record without clear precursors. The Mu theory offers a potential explanation for this pattern. If these advanced techniques and knowledge systems were inherited from a much older civilization, rather than developed independently by each island population, it would explain why they appear so suddenly and why they're so remarkably sophisticated. The survivors of Mu wouldn't need to reinvent navigation or astronomy. They would simply be preserving and adapting knowledge that their ancestors had already perfected. Of course, the Mu theory faces significant challenges from mainstream archaeology and geology. Critics point out that there's no clear geological evidence for a large landmass in the Pacific that could have supported the kind of advanced civilization described by Mu theorists. They also note that many of the claims about Mu are based on speculative interpretations of limited evidence, rather than rigorous scientific investigation. But the theory continues to evolve as new evidence emerges. Recent discoveries of underwater structures throughout the Pacific, advances in our understanding of sea level changes during the ice ages, and new genetic and linguistic evidence about Pacific populations have all provided potential support for modified versions of the Mu theory. While a literal continent of Mu remains unlikely, the possibility that advanced civilizations existed in areas of the Pacific that are now underwater is becoming increasingly plausible. The connection between Hawaii and the broader mystery of advanced Pacific civilizations remains one of the most intriguing puzzles in archaeology. Whether or not Mu existed as a literal continent, the pattern of sophisticated knowledge found throughout the Pacific suggests that our understanding of ancient civilizations is far from complete. The astronomical alignments at Wailua, the genetic anomalies in Polynesian populations, the linguistic connections that span the Pacific, all of these point to a much more complex and interconnected ancient world than traditional models acknowledge. As underwater archaeology continues to reveal new evidence of submerged structures and ancient coastlines, and as genetic and linguistic research provides new insights into Pacific populations, we may eventually piece together a clearer picture of what really happened in the ancient Pacific. Whether that picture includes a lost continent of Mu, or simply reveals a much more sophisticated network of ancient civilizations than we previously imagined, it's clear that the mysteries of ancient Hawaii are connected to much larger questions about the true capabilities and extent of our ancestors' knowledge. The story of Mu reminds us that history is far from settled, and that the most intriguing mysteries often lie not in what we know, but in what we've forgotten. As we continue to explore the depths of the Pacific and decode the messages left by ancient civilizations, we may discover that the truth about our past is stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. In the quiet hours when most of Hawaii sleeps, when the trade winds whisper through the palm trees and the ocean waves lap gently against ancient shores, something else moves through the darkness. Something that has been walking these islands for centuries, maybe longer. The locals call them the Night Marchers, and if you've lived in Hawaii long enough, you've probably heard the stories. Ghostly processions of ancient Hawaiian warriors, still patrolling the lands they once protected in life, still following paths worn into the earth by countless generations before them. But what makes the Night Marchers different from other ghost stories is the sheer consistency of the reports. This isn't just folklore passed down through families or tales told around campfires. These are detailed, first-hand accounts from people across all walks of life. Police officers, construction workers, tourists, lifelong residents, skeptics and believers alike. They all describe the same thing. The sound of drums echoing through the night, the rhythmic chanting of voices speaking in ancient Hawaiian, and the unmistakable sound of feet marching in perfect formation across land that might now be covered in concrete and modern buildings, but once knew only the footsteps of Hawaiian warriors. The phenomenon is so widely acknowledged that many locals simply accept it as part of life in the islands. Construction projects have been delayed or rerouted when workers report encounters with the Night Marchers. Hotel staff warn guests about certain areas and times when they might encounter them. Real estate agents have been known to mention the possibility when showing properties in areas with frequent sightings. This isn't hidden folklore anymore. It's become part of the cultural landscape of modern Hawaii. So what exactly are people seeing and hearing? The accounts vary in detail, but the core elements remain remarkably consistent. Most encounters begin with the sound of drums, deep and rhythmic, carrying across distances that shouldn't be possible for acoustic sound. The drumming is often accompanied by chanting, voices speaking or singing in what witnesses describe as ancient Hawaiian, words that seem to carry weight and power even when their meaning isn't understood. Then comes the marching itself. Witnesses describe hearing the synchronized footsteps of what sounds like dozens, sometimes hundreds of people moving in formation. Some report seeing torches or lights moving in organized patterns, flickering flames that seem to float through the air at the height where torches would be carried. Others describe seeing shadowy figures, translucent forms of warriors in traditional Hawaiian dress, carrying spears and wearing feathered capes and helmets that mark them as alii, Hawaiian nobility and high-ranking warriors. The routes the Night Marchers follow seem to correspond to ancient Hawaiian trails, paths that connected villages, temples, and important ceremonial sites. Many of these trails have been built over or paved, but the Night Marchers apparently still follow their original courses. They've been reported walking through shopping centers, across busy highways, through hotel lobbies, and even through people's homes. The modern world seems invisible to them, as if they exist in a different time, following landscapes that existed centuries ago. One of the most frequently reported locations is the Pali Highway on Oahu, a road that cuts through the Ka'alau Mountains. This area holds deep historical significance as the site of the Battle of Niuanu, where King Kamehameha I achieved a decisive victory in his campaign to unite the Hawaiian Islands. Hundreds of opposing warriors were driven over the cliffs during this battle, and their bones are said to still rest in the valley below. Drivers on the Pali Highway have reported seeing processions of torch-bearing figures crossing the road, appearing suddenly in their headlights before vanishing just as quickly. But the Night Marchers aren't limited to Oahu. Similar encounters have been reported on all the major Hawaiian islands. On the Big Island, they've been seen along the ancient paths that lead to and from Paiuhanua o Hananau, the place of refuge, a sacred site where those who had broken kapo, sacred laws, could find sanctuary. On Maui, witnesses report encounters along the King's Trail, an ancient footpath that once connected important sites across the island. Kauai has its own stories, particularly around areas that were once home to important Heiau, Hawaiian temples. The timing of these encounters often follows patterns as well. Many sightings occur during significant dates in the Hawaiian calendar, particularly during times when the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was traditionally believed to be thin. New moon nights are particularly active, as are certain seasonal transitions. Some witnesses report that the night marchers seem more active during times of political or social change in Hawaii, as if they're responding to threats to Hawaiian culture or land. The traditional Hawaiian explanation for the night marchers involves the concept of the ancestral spirit guardians, protectors who continue to watch over their people and their land even after death. In Hawaiian spiritual belief, the connection between the living and the dead isn't severed by death. Instead, ancestors continue to play active roles in protecting their descendants and their ancestral lands. The night marchers are seen as these protective spirits, still carrying out their duties as warriors and guardians. According to traditional accounts, the night marchers are the spirits of ancient Hawaiian warriors, alii, and sometimes even akua, deities or divine beings, who continue to patrol the paths they walked in life. They're not malevolent spirits seeking to harm the living, but rather protectors maintaining their eternal watch over the islands. However, encountering them can be dangerous for the living, not because the spirits intend harm, but because witnessing them means glimpsing into a realm that mortals aren't meant to see. Hawaiian tradition offers specific protocols for anyone who might encounter the night marchers. The most important rule is to show respect. If you hear the drums and chanting approaching, you should immediately lie face down on the ground and avoid looking directly at the procession. Some traditions say you should remove all clothing to show you carry no weapons and pose no threat. Others suggest chanting a genealogical prayer, establishing your connection to the land and its people. The key is to demonstrate that you belong to the place and respect its spiritual guardians. There are also protective measures that some families follow. Having an ancestor among the night marchers is considered a form of protection, as your ancestral spirit would recognize you and ensure the procession passes safely. Some Hawaiian families maintain detailed genealogies partly for this reason, knowing their lineage could literally be a matter of life and death if they encounter the night marchers. But what do modern witnesses make of these encounters? The reports come from people with no knowledge of Hawaiian spiritual traditions, tourists who have never heard of the night marchers until after their experience. These witnesses describe the same elements: the drums, the chanting, the organized movement of figures in the darkness. Some report feeling an overwhelming sense of presence, as if they were in the company of something ancient and powerful. Others describe physical sensations, changes in temperature, or feeling as if the air itself has become heavy and charged with energy. Construction workers have reported tools going missing after night marcher encounters, only to find them arranged in careful patterns the next morning. Some describe work sites where no progress can be made, where equipment mysteriously breaks down or materials disappear overnight, until traditional Hawaiian blessing ceremonies are performed to ask permission from the ancestral spirits. Security guards at various locations across the islands have documented encounters in their official reports. Hotel security cameras have captured unexplained lights moving in organized formations across properties. Airport workers have reported encounters on runways and in terminal areas. Even military personnel at bases across the islands have filed reports of unexplained phenomena that match night marcher descriptions. Scientists and researchers have attempted to find rational explanations for these encounters. Some suggest that the consistent elements of the reports could be explained by psychological phenomena, perhaps shared cultural expectation creating similar hallucinations or misinterpretations of natural sounds. Others point to possible geological explanations, suggesting that certain atmospheric conditions or underground formations might create acoustic effects that could be interpreted as drums and chanting. But these explanations struggle to account for the specific details reported by witnesses, particularly those who had no prior knowledge of night marcher traditions. How do you explain tourists independently describing the same elements that appear in traditional Hawaiian accounts, passed down through generations? How do you account for multiple witnesses experiencing the same phenomena simultaneously? There's also the question of the routes themselves. Many night marcher sightings occur along paths that correspond to ancient Hawaiian trails, routes that aren't marked on modern maps and wouldn't be known to casual visitors. Yet witnesses describe processions following these exact paths, moving through modern developments as if following invisible roads from another time. Some researchers have taken a different approach, studying the night marcher phenomenon as a form of cultural memory, a way that significant historical events and spiritual beliefs maintain their presence in a community across generations. From this perspective, the night marchers represent the persistence of Hawaiian spiritual and cultural traditions despite centuries of disruption and suppression. The colonization of Hawaii involved systematic attempts to suppress native Hawaiian spiritual practices and beliefs. Traditional religion was banned, sacred sites were destroyed or repurposed, and Hawaiian cultural practices were actively discouraged or criminalized. Yet the night marcher reports suggest that these spiritual traditions didn't disappear. They went underground, maintaining their presence in ways that couldn't be easily suppressed. This interpretation sees the night marchers as a form of spiritual resistance, a way that Hawaiian ancestors continue to assert their presence and claim to the land despite political and cultural changes. The fact that these encounters continue in modern Hawaii, often in areas that have been heavily developed or changed, could represent the enduring power of indigenous spiritual connection to place. Recent decades have seen increased interest in documenting and understanding night marcher encounters. Hawaiian cultural practitioners work with researchers to record traditional knowledge about these spirits and their significance. Some hotels and tour companies now incorporate night marcher awareness into their cultural education programs, teaching visitors about respectful behavior in areas where encounters might occur. There are also ongoing efforts to map night marcher sighting locations against traditional Hawaiian trail systems and sacred sites, looking for patterns that might shed light on the phenomenon. These studies have revealed that many encounter locations correspond not just to ancient trails, but to areas of particular spiritual significance in traditional Hawaiian culture. The night marchers also raise important questions about the nature of historical memory and how traumatic or significant events leave their mark on places. Many encounter locations correspond to sites of historical battles, executions, or other significant events in Hawaiian history. Could these locations somehow retain impressions of what occurred there, creating conditions where past events continue to manifest in some form? Whether you approach the night marchers as spiritual entities, cultural phenomena, or unexplained mysteries, they represent something profound about Hawaii's relationship with its past. These aren't just ghost stories. They're accounts of ongoing encounters with Hawaiian history, culture, and spirituality. They suggest that the ancient Hawaiian understanding of time and place, where past and present exist simultaneously, continues to manifest in ways that challenge Western linear concepts of history and reality. The night marchers remind us that Hawaii's islands carry deep layers of history and spiritual significance that can't be erased by modern development. They represent the enduring presence of Hawaiian ancestors and the continuing relevance of traditional spiritual beliefs in contemporary island life. Whether seen as literal spirits or as powerful cultural memories, the night marchers continue to walk their eternal paths, guardians of a heritage that refuses to be forgotten. Deep beneath the volcanic landscape of Hawaii lies a network of tunnels carved by molten rock, twisted passages that wind through the earth like the veins of some sleeping giant. These are the lava tubes, natural formations created when flowing lava cooled and hardened on the outside, while the molten interior continued to flow, leaving behind hollow corridors that stretch for miles beneath the islands. But these aren't just geological curiosities. Hidden within their dark depths are some of the most mysterious burial sites ever discovered, sacred tombs that have kept their secrets for centuries. The ancient Hawaiians called these underground chambers the realm of Pu, the volcano goddess, a place where the living world met the spirit realm. And it was here, in these sacred tunnels, that they chose to lay their most honored dead to rest. But what makes these burials so extraordinary isn't just their location. It's the precision with which they were carried out, the mysterious artifacts found alongside the remains, and the questions they raise about what the ancient Hawaiians truly understood about the forces beneath their islands. The first recorded discovery of lava tube burials happened almost by accident in the late 1800s when a rancher's horse fell through what appeared to be solid ground. When they went to rescue the animal, they found themselves staring into a vast underground chamber lined with human remains. Word spread quickly, and soon archaeologists and treasure hunters alike were exploring the tubes, uncovered burial after burial, each more mysterious than the last. What they found defied explanation. The bodies weren't simply placed in the tubes and forgotten. They had been carefully positioned, wrapped in fine kapa cloth made from beaten bark, and surrounded by objects that seemed to tell a story about beliefs and practices that we're only beginning to understand. Some remains were found in sitting positions, as if they were waiting for something. Others were arranged in elaborate patterns that seemed to mirror the constellations above. But perhaps the most puzzling aspect of these burials was their sheer number and the logistics involved in creating them. To reach many of these burial chambers, you have to crawl through narrow passages, sometimes for hundreds of yards, carrying not just a body but all the ceremonial objects that accompanied it. The tubes are dark, dangerous places where a wrong turn could leave you lost forever. Yet somehow, the ancient Hawaiians navigated these underground mazes with such confidence that they turned them into sacred repositories for their dead. The artifacts found in these tubes are equally mysterious. Intricate bone fishhooks, polished stone tools, and shells from species that don't exist in Hawaiian waters, suggesting trade networks that stretched far beyond the Pacific. But most intriguing are the stone bowls carved with symbols that don't match any known Hawaiian script or pictographic system. Some researchers believe these symbols might be star maps, guides for the soul's journey to the afterlife. Others think they might be instructions for rituals we can no longer decode. One of the most significant discoveries came in 1973 when archaeologist Kenneth Emery explored a lava tube on the Big Island's Kona coast. Deep within the tunnel system, he found a burial chamber that seemed to have been sealed for centuries. The air inside was so still that his torch flame barely flickered. And there, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 skeletons, each positioned to face a different direction, as if they were guardians watching over something precious at the center of their formation. At the heart of the circle was a stone platform unlike anything found elsewhere in Hawaii. It was made from a type of volcanic glass that doesn't occur naturally on the islands, carved with such precision that it seemed to capture and reflect light in impossible ways. Carbon dating of organic materials found near the platform suggested it was at least 800 years old, but the level of craftsmanship seemed to belong to a much more advanced civilization. The mystery deepens when you consider the physical challenges involved in creating these burial sites. Lava tubes are formed when molten rock flows at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Even after they cool, they remain unstable for years, prone to cave-ins and sudden collapses. Yet the ancient Hawaiians not only navigated these treacherous passages but modified them, creating chambers, platforms, and even elaborate drainage systems to protect their dead from the moisture that constantly seeps through volcanic rock. Some tubes show evidence of having been artificially expanded, with tool marks suggesting the use of instruments we haven't identified. The walls in certain chambers have been smoothed to an almost mirror-like finish, a process that would have required not just skill, but specialized tools and techniques that don't appear in the archaeological record of ancient Hawaii. It's as if the builders possessed knowledge about working with volcanic rock that has since been lost. The positioning of these burial sites also raises questions about what the ancient Hawaiians knew about the volcanic activity beneath their islands. Many of the tubes chosen for burials are located in areas that geological surveys have since identified as being among the most stable in Hawaii's volcanic system. It's as if the ancient builders had an understanding of underground geology that allowed them to predict which passages would remain safe for centuries. Modern volcanologists studying these sites have found that many of the burial tubes are connected to larger underground networks that channel geothermal heat in precise patterns. Some chambers maintain constant temperatures year-round, creating natural preservation conditions that have kept organic materials intact for hundreds of years. Did the ancient Hawaiians understand these geothermal patterns well enough to use them deliberately, or was this simply a fortunate coincidence? The spiritual significance of these burials adds another layer to the mystery. According to Hawaiian tradition, lava tubes were considered kapo, forbidden to all but the highest-ranking priests and chiefs. The decision to bury someone in a lava tube wasn't just about honoring their memory. It was about ensuring their spirit could travel safely to the next world. But this raises the question of how such elaborate burial ceremonies were conducted in spaces that could barely accommodate a few people at a time. Some researchers have suggested that the burial process involved a form of ritual that we no longer understand, possibly connected to the ancient Hawaiian practice of night marchers, spiritual processions that were said to traverse the islands along invisible pathways. Could these underground burial sites have been stops along these spiritual highways, places where the living world intersected with the realm of the ancestors? The tools and techniques used to create these burial chambers remain largely unexplained. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ancient Hawaiians had access to specialized boring tools capable of creating perfectly round holes in solid volcanic rock. They also appear to have had methods for smoothing stone surfaces that produced finishes comparable to modern machine polishing. Yet no examples of these tools have ever been found, leading some researchers to wonder whether they were made from materials that don't preserve well, or whether they were considered so sacred that they were destroyed after use. One of the most intriguing aspects of the lava tube burials is their apparent connection to astronomical phenomena. Many of the burial chambers are aligned with specific stars or constellations, and some contain carved markers that seem to track celestial movements over time. This suggests that the ancient Hawaiians viewed these underground spaces not just as burial sites, but as observatories, places where they could study the heavens while honoring their dead. The preservation of organic materials in these burial sites has provided unprecedented insights into ancient Hawaiian life, revealing details about diet, health, and even genetic relationships that would have been lost in surface burials. DNA analysis of remains found in lava tube burials has shown connections to Pacific populations that predate the known waves of Polynesian migration, suggesting that Hawaii's settlement history may be more complex than previously believed. But perhaps the most unsettling discovery in these burial sites is evidence of what appears to be interrupted ceremonies. In several tubes, archaeologists have found partially completed burial arrangements, as if the people conducting the ritual had to leave suddenly and never returned. Tools lie scattered exactly where they were dropped, and some bodies appear to have been positioned hastily, without the careful attention to detail seen in other burials. What could have caused such a sudden abandonment of sacred rituals? Some researchers point to historical accounts of natural disasters, tsunamis, or volcanic eruptions that might have forced people to flee. Others suggest that these interrupted burials might be evidence of social upheaval or warfare that disrupted traditional practices. But there's another possibility, one that's harder to prove but no less intriguing, that something happened in these underground chambers that made them too dangerous or too sacred to enter. The lava tube burials of Hawaii remain one of the Pacific's greatest archaeological mysteries. They represent a level of underground engineering and spiritual sophistication that challenges our understanding of ancient Polynesian capabilities. How did a society without written language or metal tools create such elaborate underground burial complexes? What did they know about volcanic geology that allowed them to work safely in such dangerous environments? And what secrets might still be hidden in the thousands of unexplored lava tubes that wind beneath the Hawaiian Islands? Off the southern coast of Molokai, where the Pacific Ocean meets ancient volcanic shores, lies one of the most remarkable engineering feats of the ancient world. At first glance, it might look like nothing more than a collection of stone walls jutting out into the water, weathered barriers that seem to serve no obvious purpose. But these aren't random rock formations or natural reefs. They are fish ponds, massive aquaculture systems built with such precision and ingenuity that modern engineers still struggle to understand how they were constructed, let alone why they work so well. The island of Molokai alone once boasted over 60 of these fish ponds, creating an aquaculture network that could feed thousands of people year-round. But what makes these structures truly mysterious isn't just their scale, it's the level of sophisticated engineering they represent. These aren't simple enclosures built to trap fish. They are complex hydraulic systems that manage water flow, salinity, temperature, and fish populations with a precision that rivals modern aquaculture facilities. The most famous of these is Kiwa Nui, a fish pond that stretches for nearly 2 miles along Molokai's coast. Its outer wall, built from massive basalt blocks, stands as tall as a person even after centuries of storms and erosion. But this wall isn't just a barrier. It's a carefully engineered structure with built-in sluice gates, adjustable openings that allow pond operators to control exactly which fish enter and leave the system, and when. To understand the mystery of these fish ponds, you have to first grasp the engineering challenges they represent. Building any structure in the ocean is difficult enough, but these walls had to withstand not just waves and storms, but the constant cycle of tides that could exert tremendous pressure on the stones. The builders needed to understand wave action, tidal patterns, and the geological stability of the seafloor. They needed to know which types of stone would hold up underwater, and how to position them so they wouldn't shift or collapse. But the ancient Hawaiian builders did more than just solve these problems. They created structures that actually improved with age. The fish pond walls became artificial reefs, attracting marine life and creating complex ecosystems that enhanced rather than disrupted the natural environment. The stones they used were carefully selected, not just for their structural properties, but for their ability to provide habitat for the small organisms that fish depend on for food. The precision of these constructions becomes apparent when you study the sluice gates, the adjustable openings that are the heart of each fish pond system. These gates are positioned with mathematical accuracy to take advantage of tidal flows, creating currents that naturally circulate water through the ponds while preventing larger predatory fish from entering. The size and positioning of each gate reflects a deep understanding of fish behavior, water dynamics, and marine biology that would be impressive in any era. Archaeological studies have revealed that the builders used a sophisticated system of measurements based on the human body, but scaled up with mathematical ratios that ensure structural stability. The walls aren't built with uniform stone sizes. Instead, they use a complex pattern of large foundation stones, medium-sized fill stones, and small capstones that distribute weight and pressure in ways that modern engineers are still analyzing. Carbon dating of organic materials found within the pond walls suggests that some of these structures are at least 700 years old, but oral traditions hint that they may be much older. The techniques used to build them appear to be fully developed from the earliest examples, suggesting that the technology was perfected elsewhere before being brought to Hawaii, or that it developed over a much longer period than the archaeological evidence suggests. The logistics of construction raise equally puzzling questions. The basalt blocks used in these walls weigh anywhere from several hundred to several thousand pounds each. They had to be quarried from inland volcanic sites, transported across difficult terrain to the coast, and then somehow positioned underwater with surgical precision. This would be challenging with modern equipment, but the ancient Hawaiians accomplished it using only human labor and simple tools. Some of the largest blocks show evidence of having been shaped before placement, carved with channels and notches that allow them to fit together like pieces of a three-dimensional puzzle. The level of planning this represents is staggering. Each stone had to be designed not just to fit with its immediate neighbors, but to contribute to the overall structural integrity of a wall that might stretch for thousands of feet. The mystery deepens when you consider the knowledge of marine biology these fish ponds represent. Each pond was designed to support specific species of fish, with different areas optimized for different stages of the fish life cycle. Shallow areas provided nurseries for young fish, while deeper sections served as holding areas for mature stock. The bottom of each pond was carefully prepared with different types of substrate to support the organisms that fish feed on. But perhaps most remarkably, these ponds were designed to be largely self-maintaining. The circulation patterns created by the sluice gates prevented stagnation and kept oxygen levels high. The artificial reefs created by the walls attracted small fish and crustaceans that served as food for the larger fish being raised in the ponds. The systems were so well balanced that they could operate for months with minimal human intervention. The social organization required to build and maintain these fish ponds suggests a level of cooperation and planning that challenges our understanding of ancient Hawaiian society. Each pond required not just construction workers, but specialists who understood fish behavior, stone cutting, hydraulic engineering, and marine biology. The projects would have taken years to complete and required the coordinated effort of entire communities. Yet there's no evidence of a centralized authority directing these projects. Instead, they seem to have been community efforts, built and maintained by the people who would benefit from them. This raises questions about how such complex technical knowledge was preserved and transmitted across generations without written records. The precision of these structures suggests that the builders worked from detailed plans, but no such plans have ever been found. Modern attempts to restore damaged fish ponds have revealed just how sophisticated the original engineering was. Contemporary engineers, working with detailed surveys and computer models, have found it difficult to replicate the water flow patterns achieved by the ancient builders. Small changes in gate position or wall height can dramatically affect the entire system's performance, suggesting that the original builders understood principles of hydraulic engineering that took modern science centuries to rediscover. The environmental impact of these fish ponds adds another layer to their mystery. Far from disrupting natural ecosystems, they seem to have enhanced them. Studies of areas where fish ponds once operated show higher biodiversity and fish populations than comparable areas without them. The ponds created complex habitat mosaics that supported not just the fish being cultivated but entire communities of marine organisms. This ecological sophistication suggests that the builders understood concepts that modern science calls ecosystem engineering, the deliberate modification of environments to create beneficial conditions for multiple species. They knew that healthy fish ponds required not just the right physical conditions but the right biological communities, and they designed their structures to foster both. The decline of the fish pond systems raises its own questions. Historical accounts suggest that many ponds were abandoned or fell into disrepair sometime in the 18th or 19th centuries, possibly due to social disruption following European contact. But some oral traditions suggest that the knowledge needed to maintain them was already being lost before that, possibly due to changes in Hawaiian society that disrupted the transmission of technical knowledge. The few fish ponds that remained in operation into the modern era were studied by early marine biologists who were amazed by their productivity. Records from the early 1900s show that well-maintained ponds could produce more fish per acre than the surrounding ocean, a level of aquacultural efficiency that modern fish farms struggle to match while maintaining environmental sustainability. Recent archaeological work has revealed that the fish pond systems were even more complex than previously believed. Underwater surveys have found evidence of sophisticated substrate management, with different areas of pond bottoms prepared to support different types of marine organisms. Some ponds contain what appear to be artificial spawning grounds, carefully constructed areas designed to encourage fish reproduction. The integration of these fish ponds with terrestrial agriculture adds yet another dimension to their mystery. Many ponds were positioned to receive freshwater runoff from upland farming areas, creating brackish conditions that some fish species prefer. This required coordination between coastal and inland communities, suggesting a level of landscape-scale planning that's remarkable for any pre-industrial society. Perhaps most intriguingly, some fish ponds show evidence of having been modified over time to accommodate changing conditions. Walls have been raised or lowered, gates have been relocated, and entire sections have been rebuilt using different techniques. This suggests that the builders possessed not just the knowledge to construct these systems, but the understanding to adapt them as conditions changed. The Molokai Fishponds represent one of the most sophisticated examples of sustainable aquaculture ever developed. They demonstrate a level of ecological understanding, engineering skill, and social organization that challenges our preconceptions about ancient Pacific societies. How did the builders acquire such detailed knowledge of marine biology and hydraulic engineering? What social structures allowed communities to undertake such massive, long-term projects? And what other examples of this lost technology might still be hidden beneath the waves around Hawaii's shores? The answers to these questions remain as elusive as the fish that once swam in carefully managed abundance through these ancient stone corridors beneath the Pacific sun. The past is filled with mysteries, some buried beneath volcanic soil, some lost to rising seas, and others hidden in legends passed down through generations. The stories we've explored today are just a glimpse into the strange, the forgotten, and the unexplained history of Hawaii that continues to challenge what we think we know. But the deeper we look, the more questions we uncover.